This is my school and this is my learning zone. I'm Pranjal, a full-time high school student. In my free time, I find the opportunities to have conversations with professionals from various walks of life. Over time, I have learned that you have to be humble, work hard, and be a lifelong learner to be successful in life. I invite you to join me in one such journey. I hope you enjoy it. If you're a music lover, you probably have heard of the company called Bose. Bose creates high-end audio solutions. My guest today has worked in Bose for over 25 years. He is originally from Mexico and has studied in the United States. Please welcome Mr. Rubeen Nyul.
Thank you. It's very nice to be here, Pranjal. Thank you for the invitation.
So Mr. Ruben, let's start at the very beginning. How was your early education?
My education was a little, for what we were doing was normal, but it turned out not to be very normal. We grew up in a border town, right between Sonora, Mexico, and in the U.S. So during the morning, we would cross the border and go to a Catholic school in the U.S. That was from 8 to 3. And then in the afternoon, we'd go to school in Mexico from 5 to 8 o'clock. So we were actually doing a lot of different schoolings at a very young age. And the purpose behind that was for us to be able to fully understand both how to speak Spanish and English properly.
Right.
All of my friends were doing it back then, so it felt normal. But now as I grew up and older, I figured out that was far, far from normal, going to schools in two countries in the same day. That went on for the better part of 6-7 years.
So how did the process between crossing borders go as a child?
It was quite easy. It was quite easy back then. The border was not as tight as it is right now. So we would actually just drive across the border. We have a Visa card, and we would just cross to and from. As we got older, we just used to do it in bicycles, which just made it a lot more fun. But it wasn't complicated. With the way the borders are today, I think it would be a lot more challenging.
So in school, how would you describe yourself as a student? Were you more athletic-based or more academic-based?
No, when I was young, I was far from academic-based. I think the first few years of my life, maybe till I was in 7th, 8th grade, I was very, very far from a stellar student.
Right.
I was actually the student that just managed to get the C or pass grades. That was it. I was a little athletic, but I was more into friendships and going out and hanging out with people.
Definitely. So you would say you're more of a social kind of person?
I am a lot. I'm a lot more social and athletic. Yes.
How did you change from being a C grade student to focusing hard in your studies?
That was interesting. I actually left my house when I was 13. I went to a school in a completely different city, it was me and my brother, and my parents lived about 8 hours away from us. We used to live in a boarding house, and we went to another type of school. It was still a Catholic school, and I don't really know how I managed to go from a C student to a good grade student. I actually went from C student to A+ student in 1 year. It was just, I guess it just kicked in, and I started putting in a lot of time.
So how would you say is your overall experience of your early schooling in high school?
It was a lot of fun. It was a lot of fun. I did put in a lot of hours to make sure I got the grades, but it was a lot of fun. Being a very outgoing person back then, I hung out a lot. I went to a lot of people's parties. It was a lot of fun, but I never lost sight of the fact that I needed a good grade. So it was a balancing act, but all I can say is I put in a lot of work, but I did have a lot of fun along the way as well.
So you put in a lot of work and graduated high school being an A-star student. what university, did you already have plans of like going to a specific university, or were you just waiting to see what happens?
Uh, I did not end in the school I wanted to go. So when I went to high school, it was a vocational high school.
Mm.
And the vocational high school, I took business administration.
Right.
And then from there, when I went to college, I took mechanical engineering and design. I wanted to go to a particular school, but since my brother had moved on to that city before I had, my parents decided it was best for us to be together, and they sent me to that town.
Oh, okay.
That town was Mexicali. I ended up spending, also I made a lot of good friends and I got a lot of good schooling.
How did you face the setback of not getting into the school you wanted to go to?
It wasn't easy. It wasn't easy. I ended up making a deal with my father, and he said, after 1 year, if you still want to move, you can move, you can change. So in that year, a lot of things changed. You know, college life came in. I made a lot of good friends, and it turns out that going from a vocational business school to a very, very engineering focused school, it was tough.
Right.
It was very tough, especially around all the math sciences. So it was humbling that I went from having really, really good grades to my first semester barely passing. Well, I didn't pass. I actually flunked Math 101. And it was a very humbling experience. So then I finished the second year, and I took summer courses just to be able to catch up. So from day one, I was already behind. Mm-hmm. When I got to summer, I had to take Math 101 again in the second semester, and then I had to take the following math during summer so I wouldn't fall back because everything was tied in together. So after that happened, I figured I found my groove here. Might as well just stay here and just get it over with.
Right. So what university did you attend?
I went to a university in Mexico called CETIS, and it's in Mexicali. It's right on the border with the U.S. It is a small, well, now it isn't, but it was a very, very small private school. My whole class of mechanical engineers, we were 12. So throughout my college education, my classroom size was 12. Right. And what made it more interesting, it was 11 boys and 1 girl. So we only had 1 girl in the class for the full years.
You went to university. Was there added freedom that you experienced?
Of course. There was a lot of added freedom. There was also a lot of added responsibilities. It was a very, very difficult engineering program. But obviously, I was 18, I had a car, I was living on my own, so a lot of the freedoms came with it. Mm. But it also brought a lot of additional responsibilities, like I had to get a job. Right. I had to worry about my laundry. I had to figure out a lot of my meals and spending and budgeting and studying and the social life. So it was a lot of freedom, obviously. Mm. And it's very easy to get carried away. I do have some friends that got carried away, and some of them never finished college, and some of them finished way later than they should have.
Yeah. How did you maintain focus with all your extra freedom and keep staying on your goal of completing college?
I think you just said it properly. It's maintaining the goal. Mm-hmm. It's finding what you're there for. If you're not careful, everything can get out of control really, really fast. Right. Yeah. You get freedoms, you get liberties, you get friends, you get everything. But the thing I've always said, especially when kids go to college, I say you need 2 things in college. You need to make sure you work really, really hard, but you also need to make sure you have a lot of fun. One without the other doesn't work. Right, definitely. Mm. So that's the tough part. Keeping focus on your goal. I said I'm gonna be done in 4 years, and I said it was humbling because on the first semester I was already behind. Right. Yeah. So you take extra classes and catch up with the rest of the
batch or your grade. And how did you feel after achieving this, getting almost failing the math class and then getting back to where you were in high school?
It again, it was really humbling, very, very humbling, because it took a lot of work, a lot of work to get that to catch up with everybody. But again, me coming from a vocational school where it was business, it was very, very difficult because a lot of my schoolmates, they were coming from a mathematical and physics background.
Mm,
So it took me, for me to be able to catch up to their level, I don't think it took me less than 3 or 4 semesters.
wow.
It was a lot of hard work.
Yeah.
I got to college in engineering and then they said calculus. I'm like, what's calculus?
Mm. Right. How would you rate your overall experience of university?
Oh, great. Oh, fantastic. Fantastic. Again, I worried a lot about my grades, but I worried a lot about making friends. I worried a lot about making connections with people. I worried a lot about learning stuff outside of the school. As I said, like in my jobs, I was everything from an instructor in a drawing program. I was a janitor. I was a machine operator. So I had a lot of different jobs. I picked up a lot of different abilities along the way that makes you makes you understand people a little better,
Right.
but also gives you a lot more opportunities in the future. So I had a fantastic time during college. Fantastic.
So, did you know what you were going to do after college? Did you have anything in mind?
I did. I did. I never thought I'd be doing what I'm doing today. I actually was studying mechanical engineering to become a an equipment designer,
Mm,
equipment machinery designer. Right out of college, I got a job at a company called AdFlex, and I was designing a lot of their high-end, a lot of their equipment and working as manufacturing engineering. And eventually, somewhere along the way, my route changed, and I was no longer doing design work.
what changed? What changed it to make your decision not going into designing and change your paths completely?
I think it was a lot of circumstances. When I finished high school, I wish when I finished my college, pardon me, I went back to my hometown and I
Mm,
lived with my parents for 3 years. And then I decided that's not what I wanted. I did not want to be in that town, and I did not want to be, and I wanted something different. And I wanted to go back to the city where I went to college.
right.
And I tried to find a job, and I couldn't find a job. And I ended up in a town right next to it, about 80 kilometers east of it, called Bose Corporation, speaker company.
Right, right. So before you work at Bose Corporation, as you mentioned before, you worked at AdFlex. How did you get the job at AdFlex?
Uh, they were actually they were hiring. They used to be part of another company called Rogers Corporation,
Oh,
and they were spun off. And when they were spun off, they were actually growing their Mexico operation. So I had applied and I got the job.
so every student at that time has an expectation of what their first job would be. Like, did the job meet all your expectations when you went to it?
No, no, it didn't. And thinking that it will, it's very difficult. It didn't because I wanted to be a pure designer, and the job wasn't a pure designer. I wanted more design work, not very people oriented, and it turns out that I had to work with a lot of people. We used to
Oh,
do a lot of transfers. We used to do a lot of upgrades, items like that. So it was a good learning experience. I learned what to do and I learned what not to do in that job. But eventually I made the decision to leave. It was almost 4 years later.
you say was your best memory of working at AdFlex?
My best memory of working at Afflex. I think it was the initial part it was very small when I joined that company. It was 964. And I remember the number because it was my employee number when I first joined,
Right.
964. And it went through a lot of changes in those 3.5, 4 years. When I left, it was over 6,000 people and it was several different buildings.
Wow.
So it was there was a lot of learning, a lot of changes, especially as different product mixes came in, different equipment, different settings. We went from 1 building to 5 buildings, and I was fortunate enough to work in all those 5 buildings. So that was a lot of work and a lot of lessons. And I made a lot of good friends. I still keep in touch. I want to say maybe 30, 40 people that I used to work for since 1994. We still we don't talk regularly, but we catch up occasionally. So that was a lot of fun.
So you work in AdFlex about 4 years and then decide that this is not for you and you move to Bose Corporation. So how did you make the transfer from such a small company to a massive corporation? Was the change difficult?
It wasn't, because Bose is not a huge company. It wasn't back then. Bose, when I joined, maybe we were 7,000, 8,000 worldwide.
Oh, okay.
And it was a completely different job role. I was a manufacturing engineer for products. And it was transferring equipment, designing processes, items like that. My first job, I had a line that we used to make speakers, just the small speakers, the twiddlers. That was my first job with them. And then I moved on to another area where we would make woofers and subwoofers, and it just changed. It was a lot more interesting because Bose was very technologically savvy. Right. So there was always something coming there, always something coming.
When you got to Bose and at your first job, did it meet your expectations like AdFlex did it? When you came to job, did you know that this is what you wanted to do?
I did. But then after a year, I figured out that's not what I wanted to do.
Did you want to leave Bose again, or were you going to climb the corporate ladder and try to get a different position inside of Bose?
My initial idea is I was going to be in Bose for 1 year only. That was it. That was the plan. While I moved to San Luis, which was closer to the city that I wanted to live in, I figured I'd be there for 1 year and move on to the big city. And the city's called Mexicali, and it pans out that I never made it to that city.
Right.
Never made it to the city.
So what position did you get to keep your interest in the job?
It wasn't the position, it was the role I got.
Right.
I was fortunate enough that Bose relocated. I was just married to my wife, Carla. We were newlyweds. And Bose was kind enough to offer us a position in Boston. So they moved us to Boston for 3 years. And that position was a lot of training. It was a rotational training program. And at the same time, we had to go to school. So that was also a lot of work. So in corporate, I did work from purchasing, planning, finance, engineering, project management, human resources, design development, research and development, quality. So I spent 3 years where my roles would change every 3 to 6 months.
Wow.
So that was really, really interesting. And then at the same time, I was obligated by contract to have a master's program. So and the company was paying for it. So I did two master's programs under them. It was a great program, and something that I'm ever thankful for Bose for giving it to me.
So you mentioned that your roles would change every few months. How did you know what to do at each role? Was it a challenge getting adjusted to each different role you got, or did it come naturally?
It comes naturally, but you have to pay a lot of attention. Because at the beginning, we didn't know where we were going to be.
Right.
They tell us in 1 week you're not going to go work for operations, and you would get a design letter, and you would have to read it, and it tells you what were the accomplishments you had to finish in a certain amount of time.
Yeah, yeah.
So you have to pay a lot of attention to what that said, so you can make sure you covered everything. But you also have to become very inquisitive. You have to ask a lot of questions. You have to be willing to. People are not open until I'll talk to you at 6 o'clock today in the evening, or I'll talk to you tomorrow at 7 in the morning. So you have to be very flexible. But it does allow you to work on your interpersonal skills, but it allows you to become a lot more methodical on what you have to do to accomplish certain goals. Like there was I think the one that was most difficult, I actually had to certify a test laboratory in ISO 9000, which typically takes between 6 to 9 months. I had 3 months to do it.
Oh, wow.
So it was a lot of phone calls, a lot of asking people, a lot of asking, begging for help, begging for guidance. It was done, but it allows you to become a lot more focused in thought.
So later through Bose, you take a master's program in Boston.
Yes.
Which university do you take it through?
I went through University of Boston.
Oh, okay. Was it difficult getting back into education, or was it easy?
It was easy because I was already in the mindset that I was in a training program.
Oh, yeah, right.
But that was a lot harder than college, because I'm working full time. My wife is pregnant, and I'm doing master's degrees. So that was incredibly challenging. In terms of time constraint, I took an accelerated program. So it was 14 months from the day I started to I graduated. And I learned how to sleep very little.
So this brings me to my next question. How did you manage work life and your student life and your family life in one place? How did you make sure that you were getting everything?
Oh, that was easy, my wife. It was the work is work and school is school, but my wife was really good support to me. She was fantastic, and sometimes she would sit me down and say, hey, this is not working, or this is working, or find your balance again. So I don't know how I did it. All I know is I was relying and leaning on my wife a lot during that time.
Definitely. So what is your favorite memory from working at Bose? 24 years working and still there today.
No, I don't live for Flex. We got sold 5 years ago. My favorite part about working in Bose was all the learning. All the learning. It was so diverse in what you learned. Like one of my roles was I used to run a wood shop, a carpenter shop. A high-end company used to have a wood shop in the back. They're very high-end equipment, and then you would leave the wood shop covered in sawdust, smelling, and then you would go out and you see state-of-the-art speakers being built, or you would see multi-million dollars in high-end molding equipment, and in the back there was a wood shop.
Wow, yeah. Working, what would you say, what hobbies were you keeping up with at this time?
None. No, I spent a lot of time where I did not have any hobbies. I didn't. It was just trying to get to work. And later in my career, when we lived in Mexico, I picked up off-roading. A lot of friends had very nice cars, and we would go into the dunes. I had a pickup truck that we would go out and just ride in the beach, ride in the ocean, items like that. But that came much later. Maybe it came about 10 years after we returned to Mexico. So it took me a while to pick up another hobby.
So how did you move from Mexico to Penang?
It was again. This wasn't meant for me. Well, the original role was not supposed to be me. It was supposed to be my boss, and he could not move. He had a personal situation, and I was offered to move. I've said this 1,000 times. I was supposed to be here for 3 weeks, and that was over 10 years ago.
Right.
I came here and started working with the architects, and for 3 weeks, I went back, and then it just happened that I was offered the role of moving to Malaysia to start this greenfield project.
So you were also offered the big role of managing director. When you received this role, did you feel like you finally made it to the top?
I felt good. I did. I felt like it was a huge progression in my career at Bose. But I also felt the responsibility of what was coming.
Mm.
It was on the personal side. It was responsibility of uprooting my family from Mexico to a house where we'd lived in for many years. And my oldest son, who's now in university, he got here in 6th grade. Alexa, my daughter, she got here in 1st grade. So that was one of the main things that we had to take care of. Now, in terms of professional, it did feel good. It wasn't, but there was a lot to be done. This was a greenfield project, and we had to figure out what we knew and what we didn't know. I was fortunate enough that the first time when we moved, this engineer, Jay, really still a good friend of mine, he moved here together. He moved here with his family as well, exactly one day before I did. And we hired an HR director. The interesting part about this is when we first started the project, we rented a building over by La Paz.
Mm.
And we show up to the office. We were there for about 10 minutes. And we all left. And we said, job number one, buy chairs. We didn't have chairs. And while you're buying chairs, let's now buy trash cans. We had rented a building that had desks, tables, but no chairs. It did not have trash cans. It did not have printers. We have to start from there. And from that building, we actually did a total, we were there about 2 months. We managed to hire a lot of our first team, but it was interesting. The site was getting built. We were trying to hire. It was a lot of fun, but it was a lot of challenges,
When you got this role, did you feel like you're well suited for it, or did you experience doubt?
I experienced doubt. I did. I believe that I could run the operation. I believe that I could set up all the manufacturing, but it was the everything around it. It was building the site. It was hiring the people without fully understanding the culture. It was setting up a team. It was installing. When you do a building from scratch, you actually have to begin by creating the work culture that you want. So it was doubt. It was a lot of concern, but I did manage to have a great team, and it worked out for the best.
Right. So you mentioned working with different cultures. Do you have any advice when other people work with different cultures, whether it be anywhere in the world?
Don't fight the culture. Don't fight the culture. Whatever you do, don't fight it. My HR director once told me when we first moved here, when we see people being weird, he said, "You're the weird one." Because you have certain culture that you brought from Mexico, a culture that you brought from the US. It's not necessarily the culture that's here. So I spent the first year and a half trying to become one with the culture, trying to become understanding. There was not something we would miss. We would not miss Taipusan. We would not miss Wesak. We would not miss Chinese New Year. We wouldn't miss Raya celebrations. We're invited. So we embraced the culture, and it made it a lot easier. It makes it a lot easier, and it also helps you grow a lot more as a person.
So throughout all your working experience, how much of your success would you say was luck, and how much of your success would you give to hard work?
As I said, I think luck is finding money on the floor. There's always hard work. There's always opportunities. But when opportunity comes, you have to be ready for it. You have to have done a lot of the legwork. Maybe you might say it was lucky that you were there. Maybe, I don't think so. I think it has to do a lot with the preparation you put in. It has a lot to do with the effort, the availability. It has a lot to learn with being open. So luck is tough. Luck is finding money on the floor.
Yes. Thank you once again for your great advice and your time. I've truly learned a lot. Thank you once again.
Thank you very much, Pranjal.